My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the message again, the familiar scent of burnt coffee from the break room, mixing with the chemical smell of new carpet that still lingered months after the office renovation. Outside my cubicle, the usual morning chatter of my colleagues felt muted and distant, as if I were underwater. The soft click of heels on linoleum announced the arrival of Vanessa Chen, my cubicle neighbor, and the woman I'd considered a close colleague for the past 2 years since she'd transferred from our Phoenix office. Her perfectly styled black hair caught the overhead lighting as she peered over the low partition separating our workspaces, her dark eyes scanning my face with what I thought was genuine concern. I turned my monitor slightly so she could see the email. Harrison Industries just dropped us. They're claiming I missed 3 major deadlines and sent them inappropriate responses to their concerns. Vanessa, I've never missed a deadline in my life, and I certainly never sent them anything unprofessional. Vanessa's manicured fingers drummed against the partition as she leaned closer, her floral perfume mixing with the perpetual smell of toner cartridges that seemed to permeate every corner of our office. That's so strange, Patricia. Have you been feeling overwhelmed lately? Maybe something slipped through the cracks? The suggestion stung more than it should have. I'd been managing complex accounts since before Vanessa had even graduated college, but lately I'd noticed small discrepancies in my work that I couldn't explain. Client emails that referenced conversations I didn't remember having, missed follow-ups that I was certain I'd scheduled, and now this devastating termination. I need to call my son, I said, more to myself than to Vanessa. David will know what to do. That evening, I sat across from David Moore at his kitchen table, surrounded by the comforting chaos of his family life. Coloring books and juice boxes cluttered the granite countertop, and the lingering aroma of his wife's homemade lasagna filled the warm space. At 31, David had inherited his father's analytical mind and my stubborn determination, traits that had served him well as a software engineer. "Mom, walk me through exactly what's been happening at work," David said, his laptop open in front of him, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Start from the beginning, and don't leave out any details, no matter how small they seem." "Has anyone else had access to your computer or email accounts?" he asked. "Only Vanessa, really. We cover for each other during lunch breaks and vacation days. It's standard practice in our department." Even as I said it, a cold realization began forming in the pit of my stomach. The next morning, I arrived at work early, hoping to get a head start on damage control with my remaining clients. The office was nearly empty, just the night cleaning crew finishing up and the security guard making his rounds. As I settled into my chair, I noticed something odd. My computer monitor was still warm, despite the fact that I'd shut everything down properly the night before. "You're here early, Patricia. Couldn't sleep?" Margaret set one of the cups on my desk, the rich aroma of real espresso a welcome change from the office break room's bitter brew. I told Margaret about the Harrison Industries debacle and my growing suspicions. Her expression grew more serious with each detail, her weathered hands wrapping around her coffee cup as she absorbed the full scope of what I was describing. "Patricia, honey, I need to tell you something," Margaret said, glancing around the still empty office. "I've been noticing things too. Late last Tuesday, I came back to grab my reading glasses and saw someone at your desk. When I got closer, I realized it was Vanessa, and she was logged into your email account." The coffee cup slipped from my hands, hitting the desk with a sharp clink that seemed to echo through the quiet office. Hot liquid spread across my desk pad, soaking into the papers I'd organized so carefully the night before. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. In an office environment where colleagues were constantly covering for each other, seeing someone at another person's desk wasn't necessarily suspicious. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Another client, Morrison and Associates, was requesting an urgent meeting to discuss recent communication issues. My stomach dropped as I realized the scope of what was happening. But what I discovered next shifted everything. Margaret, I need to ask you something, and please think carefully. When you saw Vanessa at my desk, do you remember exactly what time it was? Margaret set down her coffee and closed her eyes, the way she always did when trying to recall precise details. It was around 8:30. I remember because the building maintenance crew was still working on the third floor, and they usually finish by 9. I pulled up my email logs on my phone, scrolling back to the previous Tuesday. There it was. At 8:47 p.m., someone had sent a message to Harrison Industries from my account, the very email that had started this nightmare. The timestamp matched perfectly with Margaret's observation. She's been using my login credentials, I said, more to myself than to Margaret. But how did she get them? Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice even though we were still alone in the office. Patricia, remember last month when IT made everyone update their passwords? Vanessa was helping people who were having trouble with the new system requirements. Where did you put the sticky note? I closed my eyes, trying to recreate that chaotic afternoon. Under my keyboard. I thought it would be safe there, hidden from view. I lifted my keyboard now, and the small yellow square of paper was gone. Margaret shook her head slowly. That explains how she's been accessing your email, but Patricia, this is bigger than just reading your messages. She's been actively responding to clients, pretending to be you. The full scope of Vanessa's deception was becoming clear, but what troubled me most was the why. We'd worked together for 3 years without any major conflicts. I'd even recommended her for the promotion she'd received last spring. Good morning, ladies. We both turned to see Vanessa herself walking toward us, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She carried her usual oversized designer handbag and wore the confident smile that had always made her popular with clients. You're both here early today, Vanessa continued, settling into her cubicle just 20 feet from my desk. Patricia, I hope you're not too stressed about the Harrison situation. Sometimes these client relationships just run their course. The casual way she mentioned Harrison Industries made my blood run cold. Margaret's hand found my arm under the desk, a silent warning to stay calm. Actually, I'm trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, I replied, keeping my voice level. The clients seem to think I sent them messages that I don't remember sending. Vanessa's fingers paused over her keyboard for just a moment before resuming their typing. That's strange. Maybe you should check with IT about possible security issues. Margaret cleared her throat. That's actually good advice, Vanessa. Patricia, didn't you say your computer seemed to have been used after hours? Yes, I said, watching Vanessa's reflection in my monitor. Her shoulders had tensed slightly. Someone accessed my workstation after I'd shut everything down properly. Well, you know how unreliable these old systems can be, Vanessa said, but her laugh sounded forced. Sometimes they don't shut down completely. I opened my desk drawer, pretending to look for a pen while actually checking if anything else was missing. My spare office key, the one I kept for emergencies, was gone. The same key that would have given someone access to my workspace after hours. Margaret must have seen something in my expression because she immediately stood up. Patricia, why don't we grab some fresh air? I think we both need a short break. Outside in the hallway, Margaret gripped my shoulders. She took your key too, didn't she? It's gone, along with who knows what else. I felt sick thinking about how long this had been going on. how many clients might have received manipulated communications from my account. "We need to document everything before confronting her directly," Margaret said. "But Patricia, there's something else you should know. Yesterday, I overheard Vanessa on a phone call. She was talking to someone about the Henderson account." My heart sank. Henderson Industries was my biggest client, worth nearly 40% of my annual commission. What did she say? She mentioned something about positioning herself as their primary contact when you inevitably made mistakes with other accounts. "Patricia, I think she's been systematically sabotaging your relationships to steal your client base." But as we stood there processing the full scope of her betrayal, I heard footsteps approaching from the stairwell. Heavy, measured steps that I recognized immediately. It was our department director, and from the grim expression on his face, I realized that whatever Vanessa had planned was about to reach its devastating conclusion. "Patricia Margaret," he said, his voice carrying that formal tone that made my stomach clench. "I need to see you both in my office immediately." The walk down the corridor felt endless. Each step echoed in the suddenly quiet hallway, and I could feel the weight of curious stares from other cubicles as we passed. The motivational posters lining the walls. "Teamwork makes the dream work," and "excellence in every interaction," now seemed to mock me with their cheerful optimism. Mr. Davidson's office smelled of coffee and old paperwork, with hints of the pine air freshener he kept near his filing cabinet. The familiar scent, usually comforting, now made me feel nauseous. He gestured for us to sit in the 2 chairs facing his massive oak desk, the same chairs where I'd received my last performance review just 3 months ago. "I've received some very concerning reports about irregularities in client communications," he began, opening a manila folder thick with printed emails. My heart hammered against my ribs as I recognized my own correspondence. But something was wrong with the formatting, the tone, the professional language I always used. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "What kind of irregularities?" "Unprofessional language, missed deadlines, contradictory information sent to the same clients within hours of each other." Mr. Davidson's fingers drummed against the desk surface. "Patricia, the Henderson Industries account specifically requested to discuss reassigning their portfolio to another representative." "Mr. Davidson, there's been a mistake," I started, but he held up his hand. Margaret's chair creaked as she shifted uncomfortably. I could feel her anger radiating beside me, her protective instincts warring with the professional setting. Outside Mr. Davidson's window, storm clouds were gathering over the parking lot, turning the afternoon light gray and oppressive. "These emails," I said, pointing at the folder. "Some of them aren't what I sent. The language is wrong, the details are incorrect." Mr. Davidson's eyebrows rose. "Are you suggesting someone else sent emails from your account?" Before I could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. Vanessa entered without waiting for permission, her expression perfectly composed, except for the slight flush in her cheeks that I'd learned to recognize as excitement barely contained. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, though her tone suggested anything but regret. "But I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday about the Henderson transition plan." The room went completely silent. Margaret's intake of breath was audible in the stillness, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Mr. Davidson looked between us with growing confusion. "What transition plan?" he asked slowly. Vanessa's smile was practiced and professional. "The contingency we discussed for reassigning Patricia's accounts while she works through her performance issues. I've already begun building relationships with her key clients to ensure continuity of service." Margaret stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "That's incredibly presumptuous, Vanessa. You're talking about Patricia as if she's already been reassigned." "I'm just being proactive. Vanessa replied smoothly. When performance issues arise, it's important to protect our client relationships. But as I watched her confident performance, I noticed something she didn't expect. Mr. Davidson wasn't nodding along with her suggestions. Instead, his expression was growing more suspicious by the moment. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "I don't recall having any conversation about transition plans." "Perhaps I misunderstood," Vanessa said, her voice still controlled, but with a slight tremor that hadn't been there moments before. "When we discussed the challenges with client communication, I thought you were suggesting we explore alternatives." Mr. Davidson leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he regarded her with the same analytical expression he used when reviewing quarterly reports. "I don't recall discussing challenges with Patricia's client communication at all. In fact, until this morning, I wasn't aware there were any issues." The air conditioning hummed quietly in the background, but the room felt stifling. I could feel sweat beading along my hairline as the full scope of Vanessa's manipulation began to unfold. She had been so confident, so certain that her version of events would be accepted without question. The gold employee pin on her lapel caught the light again, and I wondered how many other achievements in her career had been built on similar deceptions. "Vanessa," Mr. Davidson continued, his tone taking on the measured quality he used when addressing serious misconduct. "I'm beginning to think we need to examine this situation more carefully. Patricia has brought some concerning evidence to my attention." Vanessa's composure cracked a little further. A flush was creeping up her neck, staining the collar of her pristine white blouse. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Patricia has been under a lot of stress lately, and sometimes when people are struggling professionally, they look for external explanations for their difficulties." The calculated cruelty of the statement took my breath away. Even now, caught in her lies, she was trying to gaslight me into doubting my own perceptions. I felt Margaret's hand find mine under the table, her grip strong and reassuring. "The timestamps don't lie," I said, finding my voice despite the tremor of emotion threatening to break through. "These emails show times when I wasn't even in the office. When I was homesick with the flu last Tuesday, somehow 3 emails went out from my account to the Morrison Group, completely changing the terms we had discussed." Mr. Davidson picked up one of the printed emails, studying it carefully. "This email to Morrison Group suggests we're dropping their preferred vendor arrangement. That's not something we would do without extensive discussion." "Exactly," I said, feeling a surge of vindication. "I never sent that email. The Morrison Group called me confused and upset, thinking I was trying to force them into a corner. It took me an hour to smooth things over, and I still don't think they trust us completely." Vanessa's breathing had become slightly shallow, though she was clearly fighting to maintain control. Her manicured fingernails drummed once against the table before she caught herself and stilled them. "Computer systems can be unreliable. Perhaps there was a technical glitch." Margaret leaned forward slightly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Patricia mentioned her office key went missing last month. She thought she had simply misplaced it." The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. I remembered that morning when I couldn't find my key, the frustration of having to wait for security to let me into my own office. I had been so busy, so stressed about meeting deadlines, that I hadn't questioned the missing key as thoroughly as I should have. "I had to get a replacement from security," I said, the memory crystallizing. "But if someone had found the original key, they could have been accessing my office after hours." Mr. Davidson set down the email and fixed Vanessa with a steady stare. "I think we need to have a very different conversation than the one I was expecting when I came in this morning." "I think," Margaret said carefully, her voice measured and professional, "we should review the security footage from the past month, particularly the after-hours access logs. That won't be necessary, she said quickly, her voice higher than usual. I can explain everything. Mr. Davidson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I'm listening. The words seemed to catch in Vanessa's throat. She opened her mouth twice before any sound came out, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I never meant for it to go this far. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly, I just felt sick. This was someone I had shared coffee with, someone I had asked about her weekend plans, someone I had considered inviting to my birthday party last year. How far, exactly? Margaret asked, her tone remaining carefully neutral despite the gravity of the situation. The bitterness in her voice was so sharp it made me flinch. I had no idea she felt this way about my work, about me. Vanessa, I never tried to take anything from you. The Hartwell project came to me because of my background in their industry. Mr. Davidson's expression had grown increasingly stern during this exchange. So you decided to sabotage Patricia's other client relationships out of spite? Not spite, Vanessa said quickly, though her defense sounded hollow even to her own ears. I thought if I could just level the playing field a little, show everyone that Patricia wasn't as perfect as they all seemed to think. By sending emails from my account that could have destroyed years of trust with our clients? My voice was rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. Vanessa, the Morrison Group almost terminated their contract with us. The Brennan family stopped returning my calls for 2 weeks because they thought I was trying to manipulate them into a deal they didn't want. Tears were starting to form in Vanessa's eyes, though she was fighting them with everything she had. I was going to fix it. After I got the recognition I deserved, I was going to help repair those relationships. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Margaret was taking notes throughout this confession, her pen moving steadily across her legal pad. The sound of her writing seemed impossibly loud in the heavy atmosphere of the room. How did you access Patricia's office? Mr. Davidson asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who was already planning the consequences of what he was hearing. Vanessa's shoulders sagged as the last of her resistance crumbled. I saw her key fall out of her purse in the break room. She was rushing to get to the Morrison meeting, and everything spilled out when she grabbed her portfolio. I picked up the key along with helping her gather her papers, but I kept it. I changed Patricia's email password when I found out she never changed it from the default settings, Vanessa continued, her voice growing smaller with each word. It made it easy to send emails and then change it back before she noticed. Mr. Davidson was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. When he finally spoke, his tone was that of someone delivering a verdict. Vanessa, I need you to understand the severity of what you've admitted to here today. But before he could continue, Vanessa suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her face had gone from pale to flushed, and there was a wild look in her eyes that made me instinctively lean back in my seat. You want to know the real truth? She said, her voice carrying a sharp edge that sent a chill down my spine. The way Vanessa's demeanor shifted so suddenly made my heart race. This wasn't the same person who had been crying and apologetic just moments before. Something dangerous had flickered to life in her expression, and I found myself gripping the arms of my chair as she towered over us. The real truth is that this company has been Patricia's little kingdom from day one, she said, her voice gaining strength and venom with each word. Do you want to know what really happens here? How she gets all those perfect client relationships? I felt my stomach drop. Whatever was coming next, I knew it was going to be bad. Margaret had stopped writing and was watching Vanessa with the careful attention of someone assessing a threat. Mr. Davidson's expression had hardened, but he gestured for her to continue. Patricia doesn't just build relationships with clients through her sparkling personality and professional expertise, Vanessa continued, pacing now behind her chair. She builds them by promising things she has no authority to promise, by making side deals that cut into the company's profit margins, by essentially bribing clients with unauthorized discounts and services. Is it? Vanessa's eyes were bright with a manic energy that scared me. How do you think she maintains those impossible satisfaction ratings? How do you think she keeps clients who should have walked away years ago when our competitors offered better deals? I could feel my hands trembling as the full scope of what was happening became clear. This wasn't just about sabotage anymore. Vanessa was trying to destroy my entire professional reputation, to tear down everything I had built over years of honest, dedicated work. Vanessa, these are very serious allegations, Mr. Davidson said, his voice measured but firm. Do you have any evidence to support these claims? The question seemed to deflate some of Vanessa's manic energy, but she pressed on. Check her client files. Look at the actual contracts versus what she promised them in her personal communications. You'll find discrepancies, I guarantee it. My mind was racing through every client interaction I could remember, every email I had sent, every promise I had made. I knew with absolute certainty that I had never authorized discounts beyond my authority or made promises I couldn't keep. But the seed of doubt Vanessa was trying to plant was insidious. What if something had been misunderstood? What if a client had interpreted something I said differently than I intended? Margaret was studying both of us carefully, and I could see her legal mind working through the implications. Vanessa, are you suggesting that your unauthorized access to Patricia's accounts was actually an attempt to uncover wrongdoing rather than sabotage? I'm saying that maybe someone needed to look into what was really going on, Vanessa replied, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Maybe someone needed to level the playing field. Mr. Davidson, I said, working to keep my voice steady. I welcome any investigation into my client relationships and communications. I have nothing to hide, and I'm confident that a review of my files will show that every interaction has been completely above board. But even as I said the words, a terrible thought was beginning to form in my mind. If Vanessa had access to my email account, if she had been sending messages as me, what else might she have done? What other communications might exist that I knew nothing about? The wild look was returning to Vanessa's eyes, and she leaned forward across the table. Go ahead and investigate, she said with a smile that made my blood run cold. But make sure you look at everything Patricia has been doing, every single email. The sinister confidence in Vanessa's voice sent ice through my veins. What did she mean by every single email? The implication was clear. She had done something more than just intercept my messages. She had actively created communications that I knew nothing about. Mr. Davidson seemed to sense the shift in dynamics. I think we need to suspend this meeting and conduct a thorough investigation before proceeding further. Both of you will be placed on administrative leave pending our review. What? The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Administrative leave meant I would be cut off from my clients, unable to defend myself or correct any damage that had been done. It meant sitting at home while my reputation and career potentially crumbled around me. Margaret intervened smoothly. Mr. Davidson, I think administrative leave for Patricia is premature, given that she's the one who brought the original complaint about unauthorized access to her accounts. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to restrict access for Vanessa while allowing Patricia to continue working under supervision. But Mr. Davidson was already shaking his head. I'm sorry, but given the serious nature of the accusations from both parties, I need to ensure our investigation can proceed without any possibility of evidence tampering. This is effective immediately. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. I barely heard Margaret's professional protests or Vanessa's continued insinuations. All I could think about were the words, every single email, and what terrible surprises might be waiting in my account history. The diner was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon, just a few truckers and one elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. I found Margaret in a back booth, already nursing a cup of coffee and looking grim. "This is bad, Patricia," she said without preamble as I slid into the seat across from her. Vanessa turned this whole thing around brilliantly. Even if her accusations are completely false, the mere fact that they exist gives the company cover to investigate everything. I stared at the scratched Formica table, fighting back tears. "She's been planning this, hasn't she? This wasn't just random sabotage. She's been building up to this moment." Margaret stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "That's where we need to focus. If she had access to your account, there should be forensic evidence. Login times when you weren't at work, IP addresses that don't match your usual workstation. We need to demand a complete IT audit." "But what if they don't want to go that deep? What if they just want this whole thing to go away quickly and quietly?" "Then we make it very clear that won't be possible," Margaret said firmly. "Patricia, you've worked at Davidson Holdings for 7 years with an exemplary record. You've brought in millions in revenue. They're not going to destroy you based on the word of someone who's already admitted to unauthorized access." I wanted to believe her confidence was justified, but doubt was eating away at me. What if she really did find something that looks bad? What if there's some communication I sent that could be misinterpreted? As we talked, I found myself thinking about my sister Elena. She had always been the steady one in our family, the one who kept her head in a crisis while I tended to spiral into worst-case scenarios. I needed that steadiness now. When I got home that evening, I called Elena before I could lose my nerve. She answered on the second ring, and just hearing her voice made some of the tension in my shoulders ease. "Patricia? You sound terrible. What's wrong?" I found myself pouring out the whole story. Vanessa's sabotage, the emails, the meeting, the administrative leave. Elena listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or outrage. "So she basically accused you of the same thing she was doing?" Elena said when I finished. "That's classic deflection. Remember when we were kids and I caught you eating my Halloween candy and you immediately accused me of eating yours?" Despite everything, I almost smiled. That's not exactly the same thing. The psychology is identical. When people are caught doing something wrong, they often try to turn it around and accuse the other person of the same behavior. It puts everyone on the defensive and muddies the waters. Elena's matter-of-fact analysis was exactly what I needed to hear. She had always been able to see through people's manipulations with startling clarity. But what if she really did plant evidence? What if there are emails in my account that make me look guilty? Try telling that to Mr. Davidson. "Maybe I should," Elena said, and I could hear the protective edge creeping into her voice. "Maybe I should call him and tell him exactly what kind of person you are." "Elena, no. You can't get involved in this. It would just make things worse." "I'm already involved. You're my sister, and someone is trying to destroy your career with lies. Of course I'm involved." "Promise me you won't call anyone at Davidson Holdings," I said. "Please, let Margaret and me handle this through proper channels." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Fine, but Patricia, you need to stop assuming you're going to lose this fight before it's even started. You have truth on your side. That matters." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened living room trying to hold on to Elena's confidence. But as the hours passed, and my mind kept cycling through all the ways this situation could destroy my career, that confidence felt increasingly fragile. The next morning brought an email from Margaret that made my blood run cold. Emergency meeting at my office at 9 a.m. They've found something in your email account that we need to discuss immediately. Margaret's office felt smaller than usual when I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. She was already at her desk, her expression grim as she gestured for me to sit down. "Patricia, I need you to walk me through your email practices one more time," she said without preamble. "Specifically, how you handle client communications and document retention." "I follow company protocol exactly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "All client emails are archived, I copy the appropriate team members on relevant communications, and I never delete important correspondence without proper backup." Margaret nodded slowly, then turned her computer screen toward me. "Then can you explain this?" On the screen was an email thread that made my stomach drop. The messages appeared to be between me and the Henderson Group, one of our most lucrative clients. But as I read through them, I realized with growing horror that these weren't emails I had ever written. "Margaret, I swear to you, I have never sent these emails," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't how I communicate with clients. You know me better than this." "I want to believe you, Patricia. But these came directly from your email account. The IT department pulled them from the server logs. According to their records, these were sent from your workstation during hours when you were logged in." My mind raced, trying to process how this was possible. Could someone have accessed my account remotely? Or used my computer when I wasn't there? That's what we need to figure out. But Patricia, I have to tell you that Mr. Davidson is considering immediate termination. These emails, combined with Sarah's complaint, paint a very concerning picture. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Sarah had essentially projected every single thing she had done to me onto me, creating a perfect mirror image of the truth. But proving that felt impossible when faced with what appeared to be documented evidence of my guilt. "Margaret, you've worked with me for 3 years. Have I ever shown any sign of this kind of behavior? Have I ever been anything but supportive of my colleagues and honest with clients?" "No," Margaret admitted, "which is why I'm giving you a chance to explain this before Mr. Davidson makes his final decision. But Patricia, you need to understand how serious this is. If we can't prove these emails were fabricated, I won't be able to protect your position here." I stared at the fake emails on her screen, my mind spinning. "Can I get copies of these? And the metadata showing when they were supposedly sent? If someone else created these, there might be digital fingerprints that prove it." "I can arrange that, but Patricia, you'll need to work quickly. Mr. Davidson wants a resolution by the end of the week." 3 days. I had 3 days to prove my innocence or lose everything I'd worked for. As I walked back to my desk on unsteady legs, I caught sight of Sarah across the office. She was on a phone call, but when our eyes met, she gave me the slightest smile before turning away. That smile confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just about covering her tracks anymore. Sarah was actively trying to destroy me, and she was enjoying every minute of it. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, when Elena's words from the night before echoed in my mind. "You need to stop assuming you're going to lose this fight before it's even started." She was right. I wasn't going down without a fight. But as I began to formulate a plan to prove my innocence, I had no idea that Sarah's next move would be even more devastating than fake emails. The fake emails Margaret had shown me kept flashing through my mind. They were sophisticated forgeries, complete with my email signature and what appeared to be legitimate timestamps. Whoever created them understood how to make digital evidence look authentic. The realization that someone could manipulate reality so convincingly made my hands shake as I typed. When I finally gathered my things to leave, I found Margaret waiting by the elevators. Her usually perfect hair looked slightly disheveled, and there were stress lines around her eyes that I'd never noticed before. "Patricia, I've been thinking about our conversation today," she said as we stepped into the elevator together. "I've known you since you started here, and this situation just doesn't align with the person I know you to be. But the evidence—" "I know how it looks," I said, pressing the button for the parking garage. "But Margaret, if someone wanted to frame me, they would need access to confidential information about my clients, my projects, my schedule. They would need to know enough about my work patterns to make those fake emails believable." Margaret was quiet for a moment, her reflection in the polished elevator doors looking troubled. "You're suggesting this was an inside job?" "I'm saying that whoever did this knows me well enough to craft a convincing lie." The elevator dinged softly as we reached the parking level. Margaret turned to face me fully, her expression serious. "Patricia, be very careful about making accusations without solid proof. If you're wrong, it could make everything worse." I nodded, understanding the warning beneath her words. But as I walked to my car through the dimly lit parking garage, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out faster than I'd anticipated. "I've been thinking about your situation all day," Elena said without preamble. "Have you considered that she might not be done yet? People who go to these lengths usually have a backup plan." The thought had been nagging at me too. Sarah's smile in the office had been too confident, too satisfied for someone who had simply covered their tracks. It was the smile of someone who knew they were already 3 moves ahead. "What do you think she'll do next?" I asked, sorting through client correspondence. "If I were trying to destroy someone's career, I wouldn't stop at fake emails. I'd want to make sure there was no way back." Elena's words sent a chill through me. I'd been so focused on defending against the current accusations that I hadn't fully considered what other traps might be waiting. Margaret caught my eye across the office and shook her head almost imperceptibly. My blood went cold. Whatever was in that folder, whatever Sarah's next move had been, it was already in motion. As Sarah walked past my desk, she paused just long enough to whisper, "You should start updating your resume." Finally, around noon, Margaret emerged from her office and walked directly to my desk. "Patricia, I need to see you in my office, now." The walk felt endless. Margaret closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. Her face was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in the set of her shoulders. "Sarah came to me this morning with additional evidence," Margaret began, settling into her chair. "She's provided what she claims are screenshots of you accessing client files after hours, including confidential information about companies we don't even represent yet." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible. I haven't accessed any files inappropriately." "She also presented a timeline showing unusual login activity from your computer, coinciding with when several clients received what they're now calling suspicious communications from our firm." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. "Margaret, you have to believe me." "Sarah is manufacturing this evidence somehow. She's the one who's been intercepting my emails and sabotaging my client relationships." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "Patricia, I've known you for 3 years. Your work has always been exemplary, your integrity unquestionable. But Sarah has presented a very compelling case, complete with digital forensics and client testimonials." "Client testimonials?" The words came out as barely a whisper. 3 clients have come forward saying they received unprofessional communications from you, including one who claims you tried to poach them for a competing firm." I felt the room spinning slightly. "Margaret, I swear to you, I never sent any such communications. Sarah has found a way to send emails that appear to come from my account. The IT logs show the emails originated from your computer, Patricia, during times when your keycard shows you were in the building. My mind raced. She could have accessed my computer when I wasn't at my desk. She could have cloned my keycard somehow. Margaret, please, you have to investigate this properly. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her expression conflicted. I want to believe you, Patricia. Everything in me says this doesn't fit with the person I know you to be. But the evidence? Why would Sarah do such a thing? What would be her motive? I took a deep breath. I think she wants my position. Or maybe she just sees me as competition. But Margaret, think about it. Sarah has access to all the same systems I do. She works late. She has opportunities to use my computer when I'm in meetings or at lunch. Margaret rubbed her temples. Patricia, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence Sarah provided is extensive and detailed. If I don't take action, she's threatened to go to the senior partners directly. Then let her, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. But first, let me show you something. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd taken of the suspicious email headers. Look at these routing paths. Look at the timestamps. Margaret, I've been documenting everything. She studied the images on my phone screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. What am I looking at? Evidence that my emails are being intercepted and modified before reaching clients. The routing shows stops at servers that aren't part of our normal email path. Margaret was quiet for several minutes, scrolling through my screenshots. Finally, she looked up at me. Patricia, this could be explained by normal network routing variations. Or it could be evidence that someone is intercepting my communications. I leaned forward. Margaret, I'm asking you to give me 24 hours. Let me work with IT to do a proper forensic investigation of both Sarah's computer and mine. Sarah's already suggested a forensic investigation. She seems quite confident it will vindicate her claims. Then she's overconfident, I said. Or she's found a way to cover her tracks on her own system while framing me. Margaret stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city below. Patricia, even if I wanted to grant you this investigation, Sarah has presented her evidence to HR. They're requiring immediate action. My heart sank. What kind of immediate action? Suspension pending a full investigation. Your access will be revoked, and you'll be placed on administrative leave while we sort this out. I felt tears threatening, but fought them back. Margaret, if you suspend me now, Sarah wins. She'll have time to cover her tracks completely, to destroy any evidence that might prove my innocence. And if I don't suspend you, and Sarah's evidence is genuine, I'll be protecting someone who's been sabotaging our client relationships. We stared at each other across her office, the weight of the decision hanging between us. Finally, Margaret returned to her desk and sat down heavily. I'm going to make you an offer, Patricia. One chance. I'll give you until end of business today to provide concrete evidence that Sarah is behind this. Not suspicions, not theories, but proof. If you can do that, we'll investigate properly. If you can't, I'll be suspended. You'll be terminated. HR is pushing for immediate dismissal based on the severity of Sarah's allegations. I nodded, understanding the stakes. Thank you, Margaret. I won't let you down. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel Sarah watching me. She was practically radiating satisfaction, clearly convinced she'd already won. But as I sat down at my computer, a new determination settled over me. I had 6 hours to prove my innocence and expose Sarah's deception. And I was going to use every minute of them. Если любите такие разборы, поставьте лайк, это помогает каналу,